Boom, and we're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for this week for on.net Live. My name is Cecil Phillip, and today we're going to learn about 5 Azure services that .NET developers should try. And today, my friend Jasmine is going to tell us all about it. So, Jasmine, why don't we start off with you just having you introduce yourself and letting us know who you are and what do you do?
Sure. Well, my name is Jasmine Greenway. I'm based in New York City. I am a cloud advocate here at Microsoft. I've been in Microsoft for a little over 3 years now. And my background is traditionally .NET. So I've actually really funny story of how I got into .NET. So I went to the traditional route of going to college and I got to our capstone project. And I had a friend of mine, a friend and classmate of mine, and he told me about how if I learn .NET or if I learn, at that time, learn VB.NET for this project, he can help me get an internship at a small company he was working at. And that honestly propelled my experience into .NET. So I went from VB.NET and ASP.NET Web Forms, and then evolved through the process of MVC when it came out, and as well as C#. And it's also how I learned JavaScript through jQuery and all these things. So I've been working with .NET since actually a little over 10 years now, which is kind of just mind blowing to me that it's been that long. So I'm really excited to talk a little bit about .NET and Azure. What I do at Microsoft is I focus on academic communities as well as beginner content. And so this is why this walking through this presentation, this topic is a little near and dear to my heart because of my experience in .NET, and as well as being able to talk to folks because we can't, as we can definitely assume that, if you use .NET, you have been familiar with Azure, but in fact, we can't assume that the majority of people who have learned .NET are using Azure. And so this is really for those folks who have not checked out the cloud yet or haven't taken that step. So this is for y'all. So yeah.
Nice. So me and you have worked together for almost 4 years now, going to be 4 years soon. And I have never heard you tell me that story. I had no idea that you started using VB. Because what's funny too is because my first job was also doing VB.NET and web forms until I don't know, maybe the year after MVC came out, and then we started doing other things. So that's kind of funny. That's a really cool story, man. And you also mentioned that you're in New York. I also want to take a minutes to recognize all of our folks that are in the chat right now. So I can see we have some folks that are coming in from Romania. We have some folks here from Poland. Every stream, we have folks from all over the world that join us. So definitely appreciate you being here. I know it might be early or late or just in the middle of the day, depending on what time zone that you're in. So we definitely appreciate that for sure. Also, I want to recognize that it is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month here in the United States. So if we have any Asian folks or Pacific Islander folks that are in the chat, and you're in the United States, definitely we want to show you some love for that as well. Oh, here we go. We have some other folks from New York, some folks from France, Argentina's here in the house. What's going on? Definitely appreciate y'all being here. South Africa's here. That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, see, so we have folks from all over the place. So again, definitely appreciate y'all being here for sure. Now, the way I usually like to start the stream is by sharing some links and some quick updates. So why don't we go ahead and get to that part? And then as soon as I can find the button. You would think I know how to use this button by now, wouldn't you? Let's go ahead and get these links shared, and then we can kind of get into the show. Come on, Cecil, you could find the button. The button doesn't want to work for me today. There we go. All right, so now we're up. So here are just a few things that have happened that I want to share with everyone. So over on the Channel 9 website, Jasmine, our friend that's here with us today, and also another friend of ours, Leslie, put out this video on C# language highlights. And this one in particular is talking about ranges. I think what's really cool about this is, just from the comments and, some of the interactions that we've gotten, a lot of people didn't know that there are ranges in C#, and that's something that you could use when you're working with lists of things and arrays and things of that nature. So if you're one of those folks that did not know that C# supported ranges and indices as well, definitely check out this video. And I'll also make sure I paste this link in the chat for you to check out. And the next one I want to share, this one has been a pretty hot topic, I want to say, is supporting Visual Basic VB.NET in .NET 5. And in this one, we have Klaus and Marie that come on and they talk to us about like some of the work they did on the engineering side to have that really good WinForm support for Visual Basic inside of .NET 5. And, you know, a lot of folks think, oh, okay, well, you could support C#. It just, you know, you could support VB. It's just, you know, it's just a toggle switch or whatever. But it turns out it was a lot of hard work and a lot more involved than that. So if you're interested to kind of know what it was like behind the scenes and some of the things that they enabled and the work that had to get done for supporting VB in .NET 5, definitely check out that video. I'll also share that in the chat in a second. Also, since we're talking about Azure and .NET, I thought I'd share with you this page, which is the Azure Dev Center for .NET developers. So here, if you're a .NET developer and you want to learn about Azure, or if you're already doing Azure things and you want to look at some of these really cool services that we have, definitely come to this page. And you know, there's links to tons of tutorials and walkthroughs and code samples and things of that nature that you can always go through and check out. So this is a really cool page for sure. And last but not least, there's this little conference that happens every May or so. I think it's called Microsoft Build or something like that. Anyway, it's happening this month. And, you know, I think just today, the session scheduler has been enabled. So there you go. So if you want to know what sessions are here for Microsoft Build, you can come here. If you want to register and, you know, make sure you get your spot, you can definitely come here. Microsoft Build is free and it will be streamed online and all the sessions will be recorded. So you don't have to worry about, oh, I really wanted to see this session, but I want to go to this one too. You know, they'll be recorded, so you'll always have the opportunity to go back and check those out. And, you know, if we kind of come through here and search, there's a session that I personally want to check out, you know, little personal plug here. We're going to be talking about microservices with Dapper and .NET here at Microsoft Build. So this is something that you're interested in learning about. Make sure you come through, register for Microsoft Build, and add it to your session builder. And with that being said, I think that's it. I think that's it for links. So I'm going to take my screen off. And this is the moment where I always say, this is not the Cecil show. This is going to be the Jasmine show. So Jasmine, why don't we dive into the topic, right?
Sure.
What services are you going to show us today?
So today we are going to walk through. So I guess I'll give a little background. So earlier this year, I did a blog post about it was a theme around .NET and Azure, and that's kind of what got me going with this topic. And the 5 that I picked were Azure Storage Account, Key Vault, Azure SQL, as well as Azure SQL Managed Instance, Application Insights, and Azure Functions. So those are the five, and just, you know, and I think I picked them because of just my experience, you know, as, you know, a .NET developer, and some of the things that I wish I had known or had, or, you know, or have seen how the cloud has really enhanced my experience as a .NET dev.
Yeah, I know whenever the cloud came up, everyone always has like this perspective of what does it mean? Like, what does it mean, the cloud? Is it just someone else's computers? Is it just like some other API I have to call? Is it like how is it different from the things that like we already do? Just, you know, we just pay someone else to do it. And I think over the past couple of years, particularly with the evolution of Azure and all the really cool services it continues to add to the catalog, like we're really starting to see the benefits of, you know, deferring like some of that work to someone else, right? Having us really just focus on like the job that we're trying to do, or the business tasks that we're trying to evolve, which I always think is like a great benefit of working in that space.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I agree. And I think, you know, a lot of times when we talk about the cloud, we talk about moving to the cloud. Yes, we talk about migrations, and we talk about, you know, all the services that you can integrate, but you can really just get started with one, and then, you know, either move incrementally or pick and choose what works for you. No one's saying that you have to move everything to the cloud. What we're saying is that it's of, that these services are available at low cost in terms of, and we were thinking, when you think about cost, you think not only money, but time. Think about what, resources that you can preserve. And so time is a resource as well. So, that's what kind of the cloud is, at least in my experience, that's what it's about. It's about taking these little pieces of your workflow and enhancing your experience to make it easier for you to focus on what's important to you.
Right. I agree with you so much. And I like what you said about you don't have to use all of them. And I think that's, maybe for us, and because we work in this space, for us, it's almost like an obvious expectation. But for a lot of folks, they don't really have that type of context. A lot of folks think, oh, if I use this cloud provider, I have to use all of their things. Or if I use Microsoft stuff, I have to use Visual Studio, and I have to use .NET, and I have to use everything that's in that package. And that's not really the case, right? Like, you have the opportunity to pick and choose whatever makes sense for the solution you're trying to build, the problem you're trying to solve. And what Jasmine's going to do with us today is just give us some options, right? She's going to let us know, like, what are some of these things that we can take a look at and pick and choose from as we're trying to figure out what should go in our tool set. Mm-hmm. Now, really quickly, also, I got called out on YouTube, and someone said to me, no love for Australia. Australia gets tons of love. I don't want y'all to feel like I'm leaving anybody out.
Sorry.
So, shout out to Australia. I see some folks here from Germany, Peru, Brazil. I see all of you. Costa Rica's here. Belarus is here. South Africa's here. Amsterdam is here. Argentina is here. I see all of you. I see all of you. Don't get mad at me. I promise. Here's a country that's in here as well. I've never heard about this country before. Tarnow? Like, where's this one? That sounds pretty dope. I don't know where this is, but again, definitely appreciate you being here and spending some time with us.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay. So hopefully I'm not in trouble anymore. We're good to go. So Jasmine, do you have anything you want to show us? Any slides or anything like that we can take a look at?
Yeah, we're going to briefly go through a presentation, just quickly touch on a few topics here, and then we're going to go through a demo.
Okay.
So
let me go ahead and put your slides up on the screen.
Sure. Okay.
All right, let's do it.
Awesome. Thank you. So the first thing you're looking at here is the results of the Stack Overflow Developer Survey. This is from last year, and this is, a yearly survey that goes out that, asks devs, what are they working with? What are they working on? A little bit other demographics. And I always love to, of course, look at the clusters of, technologies that are here. So this red circle, we are here. So you see, ASP.NET, you have, Windows, SQL Server, Azure. And, I think it's so interesting because over the years, Azure has gotten larger and larger and larger. And, from my experience as a .NET dev, I think one of my things that really is just near and dear to my heart when it comes to experience as a .NET dev is the tooling. And that's what I really enjoy about, and the ability to kind of, work on something new and feel familiar with me. And that's why I think this little corner of, a technology is so tight together and works so well, because I feel like Microsoft does really well, in my experience, is, tie in all these technologies and all these ways that you can enhance your experience together. So that's all I wanted to show for the survey. But I also want to look at some additional numbers here in the .NET ecosystem. So .NET Core, as you know, has been really, really popular over the past, few years. We have over 2 million devs using Visual Studio. It's the number one most loved framework in the past 2 years with .NET, according to Stack Overflow, highest velocity open source projects. I know if any of you have ever read the white papers or any user stories or customer stories, you'll always see that the folks who are using .NET Core are also contributing to .NET Core. I recall, I believe it was the company Raygun that worked on improving some of the speed of .NET Core. It's C#'s top 5 language on GitHub, super fast. And check this out, 40% of folks who are new to .NET our students. And this really stood out to me as, because of my background with, in education advocacy and cloud advocacy, because, I remember my experience as a .NET dev, starting up, and thank goodness, Microsoft had, really good docs, but I feel like it's, just improved over time. So I'm really happy to see that, like, this movement and this adoption of .NET. So in terms of .NET adoption, over 5 million .NET devs are, around the world, including you all that are watching. We have over 700 new, over 700,000 new .NET Core developers in last year, and also 2 million publishes to Linux from Visual Studio, which is really exciting to see. And that really led me to a few conclusions. .NET devs are open to trying new things. We love our tools. And primarily, we work with the primarily, relational data. So SQL Server usually as your database management system. And, as adoption of .NET continues to grow, we'll see this new generation of developers. And when it comes to, learning new things, like I said, before we, as experience with my experience as a .NET developer, I thought a lot about like how the cloud would have enhanced my experience, if I was using it, using Azure back then. And these are kind of things in this list here that I really think about of like why as a .NET developer, I like Azure. So first are the extensive APIs. You can say with promise that anything that needs an API for Azure will be available in .NET, specifically C#. The tooling with integration is baked in to VS Visual Studio, VS Code through extensions, as well as a command line. There's many ways to interact. Compatibility with .NET Framework, .NET Core, as well as support for different databases over varying versions. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Migration support and hybrid support. Like Cecil and I were talking about earlier, you don't always have to, if there's another service that you find that would be easier suited for your needs, you can use another one, but Azure's always there with extensive tooling and things like that. So that you can mix and match if that's something that you prefer to do. So let's get into it. First, like I said, the Azure Storage account. What I really love about the storage account is that there are multiple ways. So I guess let me back up. The Azure Storage account gives you multiple ways to work with data that's not quite relational. So if you are managing a lot of files, you can work with blobs. You want to set up a file share, you can use the file storage account, queues to send messages back and forth. If you are a NoSQL person or you want to explore NoSQL, you can use tables. And if you have maybe some virtual machines that you want to give a little bit more disk space, you can use disks under Azure Storage account. And you can do this all under one Azure Storage account if you prefer. What I really like about it is that it's like really easy to get started on, and honestly, one of those services that you're going to come across quite often. When you create a service in Azure, there is a chance that it will create a storage account for you, because that's just the way Azure works. And I would highly recommend you check it out. Again, extensive APIs for all five of these pillars of the storage account. So another thing
I think for a lot of folks, because a lot of folks, like Azure Storage is one of the oldest services that is on Azure today. I think Azure Storage and Azure Service Bus are two of the oldest ones. And for a lot of folks, I know they're like, okay, here's storage. Which ones of these things do you want to use? You know what I mean? Like blobs, files, queues, tables. Like, and how do I pick and choose? I'm guessing, are you going to be able to help us with that? Because for me, I'm just like, oh, this storage, like, what do I put in what,
Yeah, sure. So say that you have, so this is actually a demo that I did for .NET Conf, focus on Windows, if y'all watch this. So say that you have a click once application and you want to be able to distribute updates to a group of people. You can actually set that up in a blob. And you know, little publish.htm file that you can use and like folks can like download your app. You could actually put that in blob storage. And the cool thing about the Azure storage account is that all of the files and the things that you put into the storage account are internet addressable. So say that I had like a blob that I uploaded. So say I uploaded this HTML file, right, from Click Once, and now I'm ready to distribute it to people. All I have to do is, I think it would be the endpoint would be, you know, my storage account name .blob.core whatever, and then publish/publish.htm, and someone can put that in their browser and then go to the HTML link and download the file. Now, what you could also do is apply, you know how in Click Once you can kind of select where updates would be applied. You can set a blob storage account so that that same URL or another URL in your blob storage account to be the point where those updates get applied. So, you know, you do your publish. You could also set this into your CI/CD process where when your files get updated, they get copied into, you know, your blob storage account or to your blob storage. And then when the user goes, or, you know, whoever your end user is, you know, opens up the app again, those updates get applied because it reads from the blob storage point. Now, say that you have a file share. Say that maybe this is a file share, a central file share that where, you know, maybe you're working with a lot of, you know, either spreadsheets or something, and everyone's, you know, kind of working together on it. Maybe it's on a server somewhere, and maybe you're ready to put this on the cloud, or maybe you're considering migrating it elsewhere in the future. Maybe you have some kind of archive set up or something like that. You can use Azure Files to set up a file share. And, you know, honestly, with what I really like about Azure Files is that you get a little, it provides you a little script that you can put into, you know, PowerShell or, you know, Bash, and be able to create that network drive so that you can share it with others, and others can others can grab files. So those are really the two biggest ones I see a lot of use of. I would say so. Right. Yeah,
that makes sense.
And then things like queues, like, you know, queues are essentially for communication. So this is really great for, you know, those hybrid scenarios. So if you prefer to have, you know, maybe some of your things on a server, or, you know, as we could call on-prem, and you want to have some things in Azure, maybe a few services, maybe some services that are on-prem and some in Azure, you want them talking to each other and sending some sort of, you know, message to each other. Queues would be a really great way to do that. They're super tiny messages that you can send back and forth and subscribe to. So that's what queues. That's a use case I see queues a lot. So blobs and files, you want to think about, like, you know your average files. Queues are for, you know, notifications, you could say. And then tables, like I said, you know, a lot of, you know, we saw from the graph from the Stack Overflow survey that a large number of .NET devs, you know, do use SQL Server. But for those of you who are in the NoSQL space or are interested in NoSQL space, tables is a really great option for key value stores. I would say another great option is Cosmos DB, which is, I don't have on here, but it's also a really great option for you. You can like set that up with Entity Framework and things like that. Tables is more of a key value store, and, you know, for small projects, I would recommend. So
sure. Yeah. And then one question that's coming in from Twitch really quickly. So this person is asking, this thing keeps moving on me, is this expensive? So I'm guessing the person's asking about Azure storage accounts. So and I'm guessing, you know, expensive is always relative to the thing, right? So relatively speaking, you're looking at a lot of Azure services. Would you say like storage is an expensive, you know, resource to set up?
I would say that for most cases, no. I would say it depends, though, as well, because, you know, one of the great things about the cloud is that you're only paying for the storage that you're using. So if you have, you know, a large number of files, maybe maybe that might be expensive, but it has to be like, like terabytes. And then I would also say that the Azure storage account also has hot and cool storage options as well as archival options for you. So if you have a lot of data that you like to move, that you're not going to be really touching, you can put it in, in cool storage, and, it'll be a little cheaper for you. So for the most part, no.
Yeah. But like you said, like it depends, right? Like how much storage do I have? How often do I want to access it? How is your what do you call a lot? Because everyone's perspective of a lot of data is different. What do you call a lot? And then like how exactly are you interfacing it once you upload it into like the storage container?
And then keep in mind with Azure, you can always go to, I believe it's called the Azure cost calculator, to really map out
I'll look
how
that up
much.
and I'll paste the link.
Awesome.
I'll paste the link in the chat.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, you can always use that to kind of map out how much it would cost for you as well. So yeah.
Yep.
So I'm going to continue on because there's another really great option or a really great feature of the Azure Storage Account. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the Azure Storage Account is the tooling. So the Azure Storage Explorer, that should say Azure Storage Explorer, is this tool that you can download. You authenticate into Azure, and you can see everything in your storage accounts. But the other cool thing is that maybe you're evaluating Azure, maybe you're evaluating storage accounts, maybe you're not ready to create a storage account in Azure. There is an emulator that comes with the Azure Storage Explorer that allows you to explore and work with a storage account. You can actually build this into your local development environment without having to create a Azure Storage account locally if you wanted to kind of play with it a little bit. I actually use this a lot when I'm developing locally, and we'll see a little bit of this later. Another really cool tool is the AZ copy utility. The Azure Storage Explorer actually uses AZ copy to copy from your local machine to your storage account, from one storage account to another, and there's only like a simple set of commands because it's real main choice or main option is for you to copy from one place to another, and there's a bunch of other options for copying and things like that. In fact, taking the idea of click once deployment, getting the most recent files that were changed when you publish your application or a new version of your application. Maybe you just want to copy the newest files, only the files that were updated since your last deployment. AZ copy would be a really great way for you to use in your CI/CD process to make sure that happens. So
nice.
And actually, I actually have another example. Actually, this is actually the example of what I was just talking about of how that would look here. So I really enjoy the tooling that's centered around the storage account, and I feel like the storage Explorer has really been a big game changer with that. Because like I said, .NET devs, they love their tools, and being able to have everything that you need, at your fingertips, being able to work in the cloud through a browser is nice. But, as someone who has, grown up with Visual Studio, I love my tooling and I really enjoy the experience of, being able to access everything in my desktop.
Nice.
So the next one I want to talk about is Key Vault. Key Vault is really great because, as you probably know, Cecil, we have been through the experience of working in a web config file. And, some of you might still be working with web config files. And we know that sometimes, storing your secrets there can be a little bit of a challenge. You're committing that into, you don't want to commit that into, your source control. You want to, just make sure that it's in us, but you want to make sure it's a centralized area where, folks who are authorized to have access to those secrets can access them. So this is what's so great about Key Vault is that you can create the centralized storage of your secrets and also put version control on them if you'd like. So not only can you store, passwords and API keys, and your connection strings and things like that. You can also store things like certificates. So thinking about certificates that you use, that you sign click once deployments with, you could actually store that in Key Vault.
Now, here's a quick question for you, and I get this question a lot, so I'd love to hear your opinion about it. So Key Vault, when I think about Key Vault, I think about like very secure storage for things, right? Not for data per se, but for like code artifacts, like things I want to use and, kind of apply inside of my application. What's the difference between that and like settings? Because we have app settings and environment variables and all kinds of things. Is it a bad idea for me to put a password in an environment variable? Is it a bad idea for me to put API keys and tokens in environment variables? Like, why should I use Key Vault instead of doing something like that?
I think this goes back to, what works well for you and, your team. But I would say that, personally, I like the idea of having a centralized area for, my secrets, especially if I'm working in a team setting. Think about, you applying these environment variables into your local development environment. Now, the new dev on your team, or multiple tabs on your team have to do the same thing. When in reality is with Key Vault, you can do something like, actually, this is the next slide here, about, like authorizing folks to have access instead of having to have them make their own access, which can also, be, not secure, and B, also, can change over time. So what happens if it changes? If something gets updated, once some key or password gets updated, and I know we've all been through this, where either you've been on call or something changes, and you were the last person to know. And that's what Key Vault kind of resolves, is that you don't have to worry about the secret. You don't actually have to even know what the secret is if you didn't make it. All you need to know is that, do I have access, and am I using the right secret for the right thing that I'm trying to access? So yeah.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So usually how I think about it as well is, if I have things that are non-sensitive, so like user settings, like what color theme you want your editor to be or whatever, I don't really think I need Key Vault for that, right? Like that seems like overkill for Key Vault. It also feels like it's something that's very specific to that user. That might be a local setting, right? Or something that's very contextualized to that person. Versus like a database connection string, like you mentioned, passwords, logins, security tokens, and those types of things that are more highly sensitive, that if that gets exposed, I'm probably going to be in a lot more trouble than if I expose like the color that you want VS Code to be.
Yes, I 100% agree. And, honestly, I've never tried this myself, but just thinking about like how VS Code, we all kind of customize it to our liking. But, thinking about when you're on a team and you have things like linters and specific extensions that you would use to, work to collaborate on the team. Like, what if you stored all that in Key Vault? What if you, were able to just distribute it to, a newcomer so that they could just, apply it to VS Code? I don't know if this is a thing, but, thinking about like just those team secrets, those team-wide secrets that might not really affect the code, but just centralizing that as well. And, I mean, shoot, I guess like, even like a blob storage account could work for that. I don't know, just something to think about.
Sure, I feel you.
But yeah, at the end of the day, when it comes to security and authorization, it's highly recommended you go through the route of Azure AD. But you also have things like access policies, where you have this expiring key that you can use to apply to secrets in Key Vault. But like I said, or security principal at user group or service or on app level. It's really up to you. And again, you can use the API. You have access. You can access to the stuff through API and things like that. So that's it on Kiva. And we'll see a little bit of what that looks like a little later as well. So the next one I want to continue on to, and I think a lot of us might have heard of this one, especially if you've been experienced with Azure or have worked with Azure a little bit, is Azure Functions. And I cannot say enough about. I honestly feel like I can't say stuff that hasn't already been said about Azure Functions. So I'm just going to highlight some of the really cool features that I love about Azure Functions, and it really comes down to the tooling. I can build an Azure function locally on my machine without even having to open the Azure portal. You can, you just use and now like the process has been so simplified. All you have to do is install the Azure workload into Visual Studio, and you're ready to go. And you can build your Azure function from the ground up, and then deploy it to Azure if you prefer. And the way it works locally on your machine, it actually takes advantage. I don't know if it still does, but it usually takes advantage of the Azure Storage Emulator, which is also kind of an extension of the Azure Storage Explorer that allows you to emulate a storage account scenario on your machine without having to create a storage account in Azure. But with the Azure workload in Visual Studio, you can create an Azure function. If you prefer to go through the route of the command line, you can install the Azure Functions Core Tool CLI. Also, you can use VS Code. You can do the same things that you would do in any C# or any .NET applications. You can debug. You can run through your code, figure out what's going on, and then if with the whole idea of serverless. The serverless technology is that this event-driven code that runs doesn't remember what it did last time. It doesn't remember when it ran last time, doesn't know what it did last time. But with things like durable functions, you can actually build stateful APIs if that is something that you prefer in an event-driven manner. So we'll see more of this as well in this demo that I have a little later.
And then you also mentioned the Azure Storage Explorer emulator. And one thing I like to use, because I'm on a Mac, and I don't think the Storage Explorer works on Mac OS. But for people like me, and maybe some folks like you that are watching, if you're on non-Windows machines, you can actually use an open source project called Azure Write, which is really cool. And so Azure Write is I guess it's like a more cross-platform version of the Storage Explorer. I'm sorry, the storage emulator. I think it runs on Node.js, and there's some other things that happen there in the background. But it works really great. You can run it inside of a container if you want to, if you're interested in containerized environments. And I say run in containers and run in a container for development and not for production. Please don't say, Cecil told me I could run this in Kubernetes. I did not say that. Don't do it, okay? You can run it for development if you wanted to. And then, when you move over to the cloud, you could use something like full-blown Azure storage accounts. So I pasted that link in the chat if folks want to check out Azure Write, in case you're curious about, an emulator that you could use in non-Windows environments.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Thanks for highlighting Azure. I totally forgot about that. But, as a Windows developer, I'm a little spoiled. I'll admit that.
That's all good, man. It's all good. All right. So I think it's time for some demos. Can we see like some code and see how this thing works?
Sure. So Azure SQL Managed Instance and Managed Instance. Azure SQL is SQL Server, but in the cloud. Managed Instance is great if you are in older versions of SQL Server and you want to migrate to Azure SQL. It's a really great option for you to be able to get the benefits of the cloud, but you also have feature parity to the version that you're working with, as well as application insights. A feature that's unique to .NET devs is the snapshot debugger. So say that you are maybe tracking down a really pesky bug, and you can actually snapshot that point in time and kind of save it for later, and then go back in time and debug and figure out what happened to your code. So that is a unique feature for .NET in Visual Studio Enterprise. Is it called Enterprise? My brain just drew.
I don't even remember what it's called now.
It might be Enterprise. It might be.
I think it's Enterprise.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. All right. So yeah. So those are all the features that I wanted to touch on. So let's go into a demo here.
Yeah, let's do some demos. And then really quick, I just want to shout out my boy Sean that's in the chat really quick. Sean says to me, "Come to the dark side, Cecil. We have Windows." Well, I have dark themes on my VS Code, so I'm all good. I got all the darkness on. I got my themes. I got my OS has dark themes. Like, we're all good. So I'm just saying, man. Appreciate you, Sean, man. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for everyone else that's in the chat. Definitely seeing some other folks with some other countries that I did not mention. I see you too. Thank you for being here. All right, Jasmine, what do we got?
So this is honestly one of a demo that I built maybe in 2017 when I joined Microsoft. And this is an Azure function that converts a CSV file into a JSON file. And surprisingly, this is actually one of my popular Azure samples. So I wear it with pride because I'm always happy when people start my stuff. But what this does is that it's, how I was saying with an Azure function, it's it's serverless, so it's event driven. And in this Azure function here, the trigger or the event is me dropping a file into Azure storage. So the first thing I want to bring your attention to is the storage connection string. This actually is attached to my local settings.json, and notice that it's saying use development storage. And what that essentially means is that it's going to actually use my storage account emulator, or my storage explorer, with my emulated storage account. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to open up a folder here, and I'm actually going to take the CSV file I have here, and I'm going to just plop that right here into my blob container. And what'll happen, let me make sure I put it in the right one. I will find out soon if I put it in the right one, because this will start running here. Maybe I put it in the wrong one. Did I? Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. So it's going to take a second here. And what it's going to do is it's going to use JSON, JSON.NET and convert my blob into or my CSV file into a JSON file. So I think I might have uploaded it to the wrong. Yes, I did. I'd uploaded it to the wrong thing. So let me do that one more time. And as you can see down here in Azure, in the Storage Explorer, there's an AZ copy command like I was mentioning before. And there we go. So it's converted my JSON to a CSV. And just walking through this, it's saying not a CSV if it's not there. And then here I'm just doing converting using JSON convert, serialize that to CSV. And then I'm actually using my storage connection string as an environment variable here. Well, you can use the get environment variable method to use my local settings.json. So normally when you create an Azure storage account, or you work with the Azure storage account locally as well as a function, it'll by default, like I mentioned before, will use your local use development storage, which is usually your storage emulator, or your storage within Storage Explorer. And that's what I'm doing here. So I'm going to leave that as is. And what is in here is just the storage account, or my blob storage container, which you can kind of think as like a folder structure, but it's not actually a folder. It's like a container or holder for your files, or a label for all the files in that, under that name. And then it creates turns into a blob. And then what I have here is inserting that JSON contents into Azure SQL. So you're probably wondering, okay, so I see that you're connecting to Azure SQL, but how did I do it? Well, I did that by getting a password from Key Vault. So my Key Vault is here, but notice that you can't. I don't really specify this like a specific secret, right? I actually just kind of put in here and and access it by name, which is SQL connection, right? So all I had to do is give it my SQL, the name of my secret, and then use the Key Vault API to grab it. Now, you're probably wondering, how did I do that? So like I said before, you can do this through Azure Active Directory. And the way that I did it, another way that you can do it is through the user service principle. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. And that's why I'm using the default Azure credential instance here to be able for it to know who I am. So it knows that the person who created this Key Vault also is the person who owns this machine. Now, you probably would want to, like I said, you probably would want to do this through Azure AD. But if you are, doing like a small project or doing this for, your own personal research purposes, this is, a great option to get started.
Now, what I love about this demo, first of all, is like you're showing all of this stuff, but you're doing it locally on your machine. So you're running Azure functions locally. You're able to run the storage emulator and the storage explorer locally. So like you can get so far with your workflow without ever having to like touch the cloud, right, so to speak, and be productive. Obviously, we can't run Key Vault locally, but that's fine. You probably don't want us to run Key Vault locally, but but this completely makes sense, right? And in terms of, again, me being a developer that like I want to be able to debug these things and have some types of expectations about how my code is going to behave after I publish it. Like this is a really great example to show that off.
And so not only can you do that with have this offline cloud experience with Azure Functions, a storage account. You can also do this with App Insights. Apps Insights is one of I think it's honestly one of the services that requires the most minimal setup to get started with a cloud service. All you really create is this instrumentation key, use the API, and you can start, putting, it'll start collecting data for you or collecting telemetry for you. So that's also a really great one if you want to maybe assess your code without having to, or even just evaluate the cloud. Before having to, fully commit to, creating something in the cloud. So yeah, that's what I really love about, the tooling is just, I can get started on a machine, kind of stay in one window. And then when I'm ready, I can, honestly right click publish, or however you deploy, I can just go ahead and deploy this to Azure. And another thing about the deployment process, I can even set up the like the keys here, right? So I can say, okay, so this storage account, actually, I think with the connection string that I use for Azure SQL, I actually don't even think I need to do anything with Key Vault, right? Because I'm already set up. Because I already set up here locally on my in my app. So there's probably very minimal setup that I have to do from this point with my secrets. So one other thing I want to show you is kind of what Azure SQL looks like in what Key Vault looks like. And before I do that, I did want to show you kind of a little bit of some Azure SQL stuff. So not only did that file, the CS file get converted to JSON, I actually just dumped the JSON file into a wide column or a JSON column in Azure SQL just to kind of show you what it looks like. So and then on top of that, again, that CSV file got turned into JSON. So now let's go on to to Key Vault here. So I'm going to open that real quickly. So I'm just going to, sorry for the inception here. Okay, here we go. So I have my storage account here, my SQL connection here, and I have the storage connection here that we've seen before. And it actually is pointing to an older version of a storage account that I no longer use. I'm not going to show you the secret, but say that I actually wanted to update that. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back into my code here, and let me just double check. So I think in Key Vault, I call this storage connection string, SQL connection, storage emulator. Okay, let's see if I can do this. I'm live coding, y'all. Okay, so my connection here, I believe, is this storage connection string. Actually, I think I might not be able to do this, but what I was going to show you here is that my storage connection account connection string here. So I have the storage connection called storage con. I could actually, apply that here to something here in, to my storage connection string in here as well on, like I have on line 65, and then update that. So say that, like I said, that service, I know from the top of my head that the storage account that was that the connection string in that is old and no longer exists. So I could go in and update it. So the way I would do that is I say that I have a storage account already called to convert here. So let's just do that real quickly. So say that I want to just quickly update that. And I'll go to my blob here, my blob account here. And I would come here and I would just literally copy the connection string. You can't see it all, so I'll just copy it here. And then I would go into Key Vault, and instead of, now I could go ahead and delete it if I wanted to, but what if I just wanted to update it? I would just click new version here, and I put the secret in here, and I'll do this quickly so you can't see everything. Oops. Storage con, oops. I put the content type. You see, it's been a while since I've done this. All right, so now it's created, and now I have a new version of my storage connection. So I could, if I had it set up correctly, I could go in and apply my changes to my my code if I wanted to. So yeah, that's about it for the demo. I kind of just wanted to show like kind of different parts of what I was talking about, and for the most part, it had a totally offline experience. And when I'm ready, I could go ahead and upload that to the cloud if I wanted to.
Awesome. So that's great. So we saw Azure Functions, Azure Key Vault, Azure Storage. You talked about application insights, and then there's also Azure SQL. So those are some really good features that I think developers could take a look at if you're doing like things inside of the cloud in Azure. Are there any other services that should get like honorable mentions on like Jasmine's top 5 awesome list, or like?
Yeah, definitely app service. And I know this is what you asked me earlier about, is like, why is app service going to be there? And I would say kind of like Azure Functions. I was actually, kind of on the fence about putting Azure Functions on there because I feel like that's also one that is like definitely popular and definitely useful, but definitely I feel like if you've worked with Azure before, I've heard about Azure, you've probably heard about Azure App Service. But I would also say I really love Logic Apps in terms of services, serverless services. It's like, I like to say that it's like a graphical version of functions. So say that maybe you want your function to do a lot. You have an idea of a function, but maybe you don't want to have, you don't want to go through a setup of the tooling. Actually, there's also tooling for Logic Apps, I believe, in VS Code, actually. Just so much tooling. Yeah, that's a really great one, especially if you are a O365 user and you are, developing for that ecosystem, within your company, or, with like whatever tooling that you have. That's a great one. yeah, there's so many out there, but I would say, yeah, app service definitely gets an honorable mention, as well as Cosmos DB, because with the ease of use that you can set up entity framework and set up that that whole Aura environment. It's a great option as well. So
awesome. Yeah. I definitely love to hear from the folks that are in the chat. I know we only have a few minutes left, but we have some Azure folks in here. Like, I'd definitely love to hear about some of the services that you folks are using, regardless of whether you think they're in your top 10 or whatever the case is. Like, what are you using to build your apps? What Azure services and .NET SDKs and things of that nature have been really helpful for you. And, maybe if there's something that you think is really interesting, we could have that person come on to do a session with us. I know for me, some interesting services that I like to kind of dive into. Like, I'm not a front-end person by any way or means or anything like that. So I like a lot of the back-end tools. So for instance, Azure Service Bus is one of my favorites for sure. Azure SignalR service is another thing that I like to use to be able to help scale out your SignalR connections.
How can I forget about SignalR? It's in the cloud now. I can't believe that.
SignalR is in the cloud now. Yep, exactly. And then also, I don't know if you saw this, we just released this in preview the other day. The other day, as in like last week, I think. We have Azure Web Pub Sub, which is really just the name for our like WebSockets as a service offering, which is really cool. So we announced that. And then one service that I have not tried, but I do want to play around with, is Azure Communication Services, ACS, I think is what it's called. But it allows you to do things like video and voice calls, send text messages. And then I think it's using the same infrastructure, I suppose, or the same processing that Teams uses. So whatever Teams uses to call you and send you text messages and do voice and video calls, like you can build your own Teams, I suppose, right? Like you can build your own video conferencing software using ACS, which is super dope. So definitely check that out. And that might be something, folks, if you may not have heard about it, you want to go ahead and try out.
Mm-hmm. Azure DevOps is also a great one too. For those who also are very reminiscent of what was it called before? Team Foundation Server, TFS.
Yeah, I remember that. That thing has gone through so many name changes. Oh my gosh.
I remember
Team Foundation Services. I see someone in the chat. George Levy is in here in the chat, and he's saying Azure Static Web Apps, and that's true too. Azure Static Web Apps just went GA yesterday. Was it? It's this week. This week, Azure Static Web Apps went general availability. So if folks want to start running their production workloads on Azure Static Web Apps, that's going to be really cool. And I'm actually today, like later in like 2 hours, going to be recording a video about Azure Static Web Apps. So definitely make sure you subscribe to the .NET channel YouTube or follow us on .NET on Channel 9, and you'll see whenever that Static Web Apps video comes out. Hopefully y'all love it and like it and share it with your friends and stuff. All right. So we're pretty much at the top of the hour. Almost time for us to be done with the show. And no more questions are coming in for now. So Jasmine, is there anything that you want to end with? Anything you want to share? Links and stuff like that you want people to pay attention to?
Sure. So I believe that we already have a link set up, but if you are, just want to do a little bit more reading about the .NET or the services that I mentioned, definitely go to aka.ms/jg/.net-azure. It'll be, I believe, in the show notes as well. That'll take you to a little one pager as to why. And one of the reason why I shared this doc is that it needs an overview doc, but it says Azure was built. Don't tell anybody else, but Azure was built with .NET devs in mind. So it says that. But of course, we know we've expanded that idea of like we want everybody to build where they are and build what feels more comfortable with them. So and we know that a lot of .NET devs who are especially in the web space are going to be building with things like JavaScript, TypeScript, and all these other things. So they're probably gonna get rid of that now that I just said that. So sorry, Cecil.
Whoops, we didn't say that here.
So but yeah, so that doc, and then my repo as well will also be in the show notes. So the demo that I show, it doesn't really it doesn't take the key vault and Azure SQL into account. I just built on top of that to kind of show you like the things you can do. But let me know in the chat if you'd want me to add those parts too. I have to get rid of, my secrets and all that, but let me know if you want me to put it up there.
There you go. There you go. There you go. And then looking in the chat also, we have someone coming in from YouTube, and he's saying Azure Media Service is pretty cool. So Azure Media Service is one of the offerings we have that does video processing in the cloud, I believe. And I think it hosts video too as well. So if you wanted to, I think between Azure Media Services and Azure Storage, you could pretty much create, create your own YouTube and stuff if you wanted to. Oh, look, CLW is here. Corey's here. What's going on, Corey?
Hey,
thank you
Corey.
for joining us. We're almost done, man. You're late. And then real quick, I'm going to plug Sean's user group really quickly. So Sean is affiliated with the Tulsa.net user group. Definitely look them up on meetup.com. And he's going to have Maria Nagaga, who is one of our friends. Wonderful human being. And she was on just 2 weeks ago on Dotnet talking about .NET Interactive. And so now she's going to be in Sean's user group talking about .NET notebooks as well. So definitely head over there, check it out, and make sure that, let them know that we sent you, Maybe we'll get like a referral fee or something like that. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's show, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. As always, we'll be back again next week. I don't remember who we're having on next week, but it's going to be cool anyway. So just make sure you come up. We're going to be here this time every Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on .NET Live. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. And take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye.